Joining us now, Democratic pollster Celinda Lake and Patricia Murphy, political columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Celinda, you just heard Nikki Haley say, now is the time for discipline. But women are already voting in huge numbers, making up roughly 53% of the early vote so far. Do Democrats hope this warning's coming a little too late? Are they banking on that?
Well, we're banking on the fact that Donald Trump isn't listening, and he's proving it every day. Nikki Haley is exactly right. She would have been a far more formidable candidate than he is. And women are just the Madison Square Garden thing, I think, for many swing and base women was just it. We're not going to go through 4 more years of that kind of rhetoric, division, and chaos. And we're ready to turn the page. We're ready to vote for our families. We're ready to vote for control over our own medical decisions and an economy that works for our families.
Patricia, your state just smashed a record. The Secretary of State there in Georgia says early voting topped 3 million as of yesterday. That's 1 million more than at this same point in 2020. Based on your reporting, your conversations there, what's driving the enthusiasm, especially among women?
So what's driving the enthusiasm is that people feel really strongly about this election. They feel very strongly about either their own candidate or about voting against the other candidate. Also, this is the first presidential election since Georgia's 6-week abortion ban went into effect. I think that's scrambling what we assume women are going to do. We've seen very high turnout in Republican counties, but of course we don't know exactly how all those voters are going to choose. There is a big gender gap here in the state right now, but it really favors Donald Trump. He is driving his numbers up among men so high that Kamala Harris has some catching up to do. And if she's relying on women, she really needs those women to turn out for her.
Celinda, NBC News has learned that 1 week after Donald Trump had that marathon interview with podcaster Joe Rogan, J.D. Vance is going to go on Joe Rogan today. And we know Rogan's very popular with young male listeners. Meantime, Harris gave 5 interviews just yesterday ahead of that ellipse speech with local stations in swing states, including Pennsylvania, along with Michigan and Wisconsin. She also did a Spanish radio station interview in Pennsylvania. Which strategy do you think will be more effective, Joe Rogan or a lot of local interviews?
Well, local interviews are very, very strong with swing women. The older non-college educated white women who are the swing vote listen and trust local media. And I think that Harris has already been quite strong on The View and podcasts, et cetera, that appeal to younger women. But as Patricia said, this is a battle, right? We have to win women by more than we lose men. And we are on the road to do that with record registration among women.
Patricia, you posted video to X yesterday from Trump's Atlanta rally. It shows plenty of empty seats there. Did the crowd bear out what we've been talking about in regards to men versus women enthusiasm for Trump?
Yeah, there were a lot of young men there. It was on the college campus. It was at Georgia Tech. He had a huge turnout, I will say. But after an hour and a half of him talking, I mean, those kids have to go do their homework. They were like, hey, I'm for Trump, but I'm exhausted and I have things to do. Obviously, his campaign would love it if he would shorten it up and not have those photographs because people did lose interest. They lost interest. His diehards were there, but they've really got to be working on not just getting those young men to come, but also to come vote. I talked to a lot of young men on that campus from very diverse backgrounds who were very excited about voting for Donald Trump.
Well, Celinda, back in July when Donald Trump defiantly stood up, he held that fist in the air just after being shot at a Pennsylvania rally, Republican vote whisperer Charlie Kirk said this.
You see a guy who gets shot and he then fights his own agents and says, fight, fight, fight. Let me be very clear. If you are a man in this country and you don't vote for Donald Trump, you're not a man. I mean, like, who are you? You're not going to vote for that?
We heard Patricia telling us that there are signs, at least there in Georgia, that this bromance strategy may be working for the Trump campaign. Do you think Democrats are underestimating that strategy? Would it surprise you if on Election Day men outnumbered women, reversing the large margins we've been seeing in the early vote?
I think that's impossible because there are more women in America than men. Women vote at higher rates in every demographic group than men, and women are registering in higher numbers. But I think it's going to be a close race, and it's a real battle. But that's insulting to say only real men vote for that kind of attitude. Nikki Haley's right. There are a lot of dads out there. There are a lot of husbands out there. There are a lot of fathers out there that don't want their daughters and granddaughters and sisters and mothers to have fewer rights than they had a decade ago. And there are a lot of people that want to get moving on. They're sick of this. The Madison Square Garden rally turned off a lot of Puerto Rican voters, but it turned off a lot of women who said, enough of this. We're not going to spend 4 more years like this. We're going to turn the page. We're going to move forward, and we're going to get things going for our country and our families.
Patricia, earlier this month, you wrote that internal polling among Democrats shows black men in particular are a weak spot for Harris. And you talked to one new Trump supporter who said many black men feel disconnected from the Democratic Party, which he said messages heavily to black women and other minority groups and less often to black men. I'm just curious, what did the men you speak with want to hear specifically? What was missing, and what's Trump getting right here?
They wanted an economic message. They wanted a message to tell them, how am I going to raise my family? They were offended by legalizing marijuana being at the top of her plan for black men. They want to hear, how am I going to raise my family? How am I going to raise my kids? How can I afford to do all of this? She'll win black men by a huge margin. She needs to win them by a gigantic margin to win here in Georgia. That's what Joe Biden did.